Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of RC Retirement. I'm your host, DJ, and today we have part two of my Zoom interview with Matt Campanile as he goes through his grilling of myself and Misty, my medical consultant. This is still going to be, I think, a very interesting conversation, just like the last part was. We are going to see things from, hopefully, your perspective as he asks us all kinds of questions, and you get to see things from our perspective as well. The kinds of things we look for when trying to assist with combat-related special compensation and, the sorts of details that go through our minds when we're trying to fix these kinds of problems. Now, there is a lot of editing here, so you'll notice that some things are skipped out. In fact, there is one point in the interview when I specifically mention a phone call that was received from Human Resources Command. I will be adding that back into the audio of the interview, but it will not be part of video. You'll be able to hear it in an edited form. I'm not going to play the whole conversation of the phone call because I did not get permission from the caller, so I'm only going to play excerpts from it, but I will play parts of it. I did try to play the call during the Zoom interview, but it was not as clear and understandable as I had hoped, so I ended up just cutting off the playback and explaining to everyone what exactly had been said, and the conversation continued. So for your benefit, I will actually be playing the call, so you will actually be getting a little bit more information than Matt and Misty had. So that's for your own edification. So good stuff for you there. Alright, so without any further ado from me, let's dive right into today's part of the Zoom interview, and I will come back and talk to you on the other side.
So yeah, moving on now. I mean, once you have the statements and all that stuff, and you do the quality check, what's the next? What do we do now?
All right. So once everything has been checked out and we're satisfied with how the application packet is, everything's good to go. Now it's time to send it to the branch of service. Now, actually, I think this is a good time to pause and try to play this phone call from HRC, because it's directly related to my trying to send it to them.
Okay.
It was rather comical, actually. It was them saying, "Please stop."
I'm not surprised for some reason.
I'm calling in reference to a packet you continue to send us. We've received it about 15 times, and we're just calling to say we have gotten it, so please stop sending it to us.
Okay. I kept sending it because I kept getting an error message on the fax saying that.
Yeah, we figured that must have been it.
Yeah. So every time I got an error, it said it never went through, so I sent it again. So I apologize for flooding you.
We thought it was the service number initially, but when I just opened the packet and it looks like it's coming from your office. I figured I'd give you a quick call and tell you it's definitely made it, and it's been added to the queue. And note that there's no medical documents he provided with this packet, so that's going to be a discriminator, of course.
There were medical
provided a whole. No, what he has looks like doesn't look like Ulta notes. It looks like his VA synopsis. Let me see. They think that the VA documents help them, but we actually need the medical documents from the time they were in the military that shows when they were injured. So I'm looking at his stuff right now. The things he's asking for, we definitely need medical documents for. He's asking for like back and radiculopathy and things like that. So what else? And he's asking for PTSD, but he didn't state a reason why.
I can reach out to him and try to get more stuff.
No, I wouldn't bother, because then it's just going to come in as more documents. Let me see. Cervical radiculopathy, initial episode, deployment 09 when he developed numbness. Yeah, but why did he? So when you talk, if you talk to him, the question we're looking for is, well, yeah, you developed it, but why? Just a disability occurring while you're deployed does not make it combat related. So he would have had to be like, say he was on a patrol. I don't know what his MLS is. Say he was on the patrol. He's infantry. You said what?
He was an 88 Mike.
Oh, okay. So then well, say the better example is using infantry, because 88 Mike, most of their disabilities are due to overuse, and we don't authorize CRSC for overuse. Oh, it's classic signs of overuse. It says it right there too. So, but say you're an infantry guy and you're on a patrol, and during your patrol, you get indirect fire and you get into a fighting position and you fall and you injure your back. The event would be you were fired upon and you fell. He doesn't have an event. He has disabilities that are due to overuse. So also his feet, same thing. Let me see, what is this one? Knees, bilateral.
Which condition did you say was overuse? Just so I can pass that on.
His cervical radiculopathy. I'm looking at the letter he provided. Okay. The very first paragraph says such classification is a classic sign of overuse.
Gotcha.
And then his feet, he says marching and running. We don't give it for marching and running. And then he says his knees, he had difficulty walking up and down stairs, getting out of chairs. There's no combat related event there. Let me see his back. It says due to physical activities required during deployment, so that's a no for his back. Normally, we don't have a problem given tinnitus. If you served during the time with that tinnitus lawsuit, that we won the case for the faulty earplugs. TBI, that's a no. He hit his head when he was getting up from the vehicle, undercarriage. During deployment in Afghanistan, repeat head injuries during post-concussive convalescence. Yeah, but that doesn't say anything. So how did he hit his head? He hit his head only on a vehicle, which is not considered combat related. And PTSD. PTSD, I would need a copy of his combat action badge. Let me see if he even got one. Is he a medical retirement or is he a 20-year retirement?
Medical.
Medical, okay.
I don't see one.
Okay. Combat action badges are just a catch-all because, they pretty much are the criteria for our program, because you have to be personally present during hostile fire, and that's what combat action badges tell us. So if he doesn't have one, then it's just harder for him to prove that he meets the criteria. Got out in 2010, it looks like.
Yeah,
he has no badge.
He had no what?
No combat action badge.
Oh, okay.
I just,
you just broke up. That's all. Yeah.
If I adjudicate, I'll look in his medical records to see if I find anything. I normally like to to see if I can get into somebody's electronic record. But
Yeah. I mean, do you have access to those?
I have access to Ulta, so yes, I do, but not our entire team doesn't have access. So it just depends on who gets your request on if they're going to be able to look in your medical record for you. Like we always try to give them a cursory look, especially if people have Purple Hearts, but they don't provide medical documents. We're definitely going to approve their stuff as combat related, but we don't know what the Purple Heart was involved in.
Sounds like you can't really hear it.
No, yeah, we hear it.
What she's saying is, first of all, she doubted that the documents we sent were legitimate medical records since they all said progress note.
Which is literally the name. Why I'm laughing so hard.
Yeah.
That is literally the name of the thing the doctor writes at your visit.
Right. I guess she's used to seeing, well, she said at one point, that they think VA records will work, but we want to see military records.
But that is a government official record, though. That's what I don't understand.
Right. But I actually, in the course of the call, she actually gave a quick run through of your entire packet, which I thought was a nice bonus. So
it's interesting, listening to what I heard, because it's, because I submitted other documentation with you guys, NCOERs and everything else that could really pinpoint it and talk about, the certain actions and things like that. And just, and that's the problem I've been having over the years, especially with the VA and, everybody that touches the paperwork for some reason has a different opinion of what they expect. And I think that's the hardest part in this whole process, with everything that we go through, is that, I could send it to you and you're like, hey, that's great. And then you send it on to, say, HRC, and they're like, this is not medical documentation. It's like, well, yeah, it is. And you're having this argument with them, and it's frustrating.
Yeah. At one point, she made it sound like your packet had no chance in the world, snowball's chance, which had me sitting here thinking, well, this will be the first time I've failed at a CRSC packet.
Right.
Yeah. But then she said, unless they give it to me for adjudication, and then maybe I can pull his medical records. And I'm sitting here, kind of like like Scooby-Doo, or whatever. What? Like,
They will also say progress note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she said, I said, does everyone have this capability up there? Like, no, not everybody, but sometimes I get to sit on these boards, and when I do, and I don't see what I like to see, I look further. Well, I guess she either had that, or she looked further, or someone who was not her was satisfied with what they saw, because obviously the packet worked.
Right, because on the decision letter, it was a CW3 that was the reviewer on the decision letter. So I think it might have went on to somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was a civilian talking to me. Yeah.
So yeah, again, and that's the hardest part in this process, and that's why earlier I touched on with you and Misty, what documentation is important here? What is it really that you guys are looking for? Because again, unfortunately, you run into situations like this where you have to maybe what's the word I'm looking for? You have to contest the decision, because maybe it got denied, and then you have to contest the decision and go back and say, okay, but this is the documentation. This is what I submitted. And again, it's just frustrating, to deal with situations like this.
It was the fear of that kind of ridiculous quirkiness from bureaucrats, to put it in a politically correct sort of way. I'm trying to refrain from tanker language. It was the fear of that kind of ridiculous obstructionism that made me ask Misty to come help me in the first place. Help me find the stuff that I'm going to miss and make these things bulletproof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think you and Misty are a great team, and this is this is one of those times that it really paid off because this started going sideways really quick, and I think for you and Misty to step in, and again, documentation was very hard because when I was in there in Iraq 0304, again, we didn't carry computers around with us. Documentation was very rare during that time of my deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan, 2009 and 10. Really, we just went back into theater there again, and again, theater wasn't really set up for documentation and making sure soldiers were getting their medical records. Again, electronically documented medical conditions there. In theater, let alone getting a combat action badge. For things that happened out in the field, and this is the struggle I think a lot of service members encounter, and why they don't apply for, say, VA benefits or CRSC because of said conditions here, the lack of documentation.
And I want to speak actually a little bit from my other experience submitting a lot of things to government agencies. I actually work with HHS and the FDA as part of my day job. And there's always a lot of quirkiness because of the fact that they're taking, 4 pages of law and trying to make it apply to every possible situation in the last 30 years since that particular law was written, which winds up being that why it's so important, I'm going to go back to why it's so important to actually tell that story and put all these pieces together for them. Because a lot of times the actual specific piece of paper that you submit, like whether it's, some of the forms are important forms, but whether it's a, record from a private physician or a record from the VA kind of difference makes less difference than the fact that you can tie it all together. And I think a lot of people are tempted to submit the records and assume the records will speak for themselves. And I know certainly in my day job, people say, we'll just send them the science and the science will speak for itself. And that is absolutely not true. Nothing speaks for itself. You have to be an advocate for the point you're trying to make.
And speak in a manner that the recipient can understand it.
Yes. There's a time to be vague or obfuscation comes to mind. It's the big fancy word. But if you can make it simple and simple enough an idiot can understand it, then you'll guarantee the idiots will understand it. So it matters less who your reviewer is.
So DJ, because hearing that it was sent to her 15 times, unfortunately, technology is great when it works. Okay.
Fax machines are the devil.
Yeah.
I did this to the CDC at one point earlier this year, and it was like I think it was a 50-page submission, and they got it at least 3 times.
Yeah, I hate fax machines with a passion. All right, so here's the thing. I don't have a fax machine in like a physical sense. It's an electronic fax. So I just hit resend on an email. And so, it's digits to me. What do I care, right?
Right.
So every time I got, submission failure, resend. I'm doing it from my cell phone while at a stoplight. Ding, submission failure, resend.
And sometimes the fax machine on the other end could be tied up. That could have caused that submission failure. And so you're just going off of what you have.
A 70, 80, 90 page packet to them. it's huge.
It is. It really is.
You know,
Now, say in those 90 pages, say it did get submitted the first time, it did get processed. Now, say if there was some documentation that might have accidentally got left out, is there always time to resubmit some documentation if needed?
yes, you can. Now, what I did learn from that call is every time that fax went through, a new packet went into the queue. Now they did go through and remove the duplicate.
Right.
You can submit additional documentation. They just log it as a new submission, and then the new documents have to catch up with the original packet, which takes a little while, but it does work. Like anything, you've got a giant bureaucracy, and it's not as efficient as if you're dealing with 4 people. So
yeah, fortunately, in my situation, fortunately for me, after submission of the packet, now we're at the point to where we submitted it, and now they've already made their decision, and I already got my decision letter. And for my sake, I'll say they gave me a 70% on my CRSC. Now, luckily for me, I got it within 3 weeks. Again, I just want to touch that everybody's situation is a little bit different. It could take longer. It could be shorter. I don't want to
about 8 months. So
I don't want to put an expectation out there saying that, hey, he got his in 3 weeks, I should get mine. I don't want to, put that out there for everybody else. And I just want to make sure that, I touch on that everybody else's case is different, situation is different than mine. But now that I'm at the 70%, I already got my VA benefits. Now, what am I to expect? Because ultimately, this is all new to me at this point.
Okay, remember when we first started, and I was asking, what are your retirement points, and how long were you in the Army? All these crazy questions. I was trying to figure out what your length of service retirement was.
Yes, I do remember that.
And you were kind of confused, like, what does that matter? I've been medically retired. Who cares what a length of service retirement is for me? Well, this is where it matters. Combat-related special compensation pays you based on a weird formula, but the simple version is it will pay you according to the VA scale up to a point. So let's say that you got, just for simple math, 10%, it will pay you what 10% on the VA scale is. But now let's look at 70% for your situation, married with kids and all that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to pull up. You don't mind if I read this?
Yeah. Go for it. And again, I just want to touch on that. My situation is going to be different than others.
Right.
So don't take these numbers, and apply them to. Yes.
All right. So 70% for you for CRSC is not going to be by the VA scale $1,816.17, because your length of service retirement was a totally different number based on the amount of time that you actually had in the military. And your length of service was 16 years, and you had 2,260 retirement points. So your length of service retirement was $577. That's the maximum you can receive for CRSC.
Okay.
So that's why, when we first started these negotiations, I said, you're actually good if you hit 40%.
Right.
Because you're going to max out for your length of service retirement once you get there. Now, of course, at the time, it was just numbers to you. It went like this.
Well, yeah, it's a lot of information.
Yeah.
It's a lot of information coming and going, and it's just trying to put it all together and really trying to understand it. So, yeah, it gets confusing.
But now it probably makes a little more sense.
It really does. It really does.
Now, when it comes to DFAST, they are exceedingly picky. That's the wrong word, really, but they double,
Thorough.
triple, quadruple check when it comes to back pay. So they take a lot of time. So I'd say expect 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, because from my understanding, as on my decision letter, they're going to backdate it all the way to January of 2017. So, so how's that going to work? Because I'm looking at the back pay, then I'm going to look at the monthly pay, and then, how's that going to work with the VA benefits? Can you give me a little bit of idea what to expect with all that?
As far as the amount, or how they're going to play with each other?
How it's going to plug and play with each other, more or less, because I've read a lot of things again on the internet, and I'm not saying internet is necessarily right, but unfortunately that's where a lot of people go to look for information, and that's why
was reading on the internet.
Yeah, and then that's why I'm reaching out to you, because they say, okay, you're going to get your monthly payment first, then you're going to get a back payment, and then you're going to get your VA payment. And so, do you have any insight on that, on what to expect?
There really shouldn't be any change whatsoever. On the first of each month, you're going to be paid by 3 different sources instead of 2.
Okay.
Or in your case, you effectively were only being paid by 1 because one was being completely offset by the other.
Right.
Yep, completely. Technically, you were being paid by 2, but in effect, 1.
Because of the offset, yeah.
Right. So now, technically, you're going to be paid by 3.
Okay, and how's that going to work? Can you break that down for me? Because again, this is all new to me. And again, the ultimate wisdom of the internet.
As I told another person a few weeks ago, take all that stuff from all the other websites except mine and flush it. Because most of it is perfectly at home in a sewer. All right, so you get about $3,600 a month from the VA right now.
Okay.
You'll continue to get that. We will discount your military retirement because that is offset. And we will add $577 or whatever DFAS actually computes on top of the $3,600. So each month you'll have about $4,300. Actually, we'll say probably closer to $4,400.
Roughly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Change.
Okay.
And all of it tax free.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So
and, as far as back pay, I'm just gonna round it down to $500 a month for simple math. 12,000-ish. It'll be more than that, but just have a low number in your head and be happy when the higher number hits.
Oh, definitely.
Actually, no, that's 3 years of back pay, so 18,000. So,
well, I'll be surprised if it actually makes it to my bank account. So let's get to that point first.
Yeah.
So.
Well, send Misty a thank you present when it gets there.
Yes, I'm definitely going to be thinking of you and Misty. So, yeah, you folks have definitely been really helpful through this process because again, seeing your videos on YouTube had really helped me and guided me to reaching out to you and during this process, because again, it's scary. It really is, because of the jargon and all the, again, the ultimate wisdom that's put out there across the internet, and everybody's just out there trying to make a dime off of it, and that's sad too in itself. There's really not too many advocates out there, say like you and Misty, that are willing to take some.
When yet another person trying to make a dime off of it came up.
Well, it's your time. It really is, because there are people out there that are trying to exploit, service members for something that they've been through, and for what you and Misty had offered through this process. Well, like you said, it's a small fee to pay for your guys' the amount of time that you guys put forth into this packet. Because listening to that video earlier, this could have really went sideways. And I kind of look at that as a blessing in itself, because if it didn't send it 15, 20 times and she didn't reach out to you, she might have just dumped it and said, we're going to deny this. And that's the way I'm looking at it, because, things happen for a reason. And I think that happened for a reason, because I think she would have probably dumped it, sent me a denial letter, and called it a day. But fortunately, it made her really look at it and contact you and discuss the packet. And so I think that led to other things, into the decision letter that I got. So again,
and
it's a very
helped us out too, because from that I learned that they had actually instituted an email address to start receiving packets.
Nice. And again, I want to reach out to Misty, and just, her expertise and everything in this process is priceless too as well, because I read the letter that she put into the packet, and it really does tell a story. It really does, because again, I cannot write something like that myself and put it forth in a packet and hope that whoever's on the other end reading it can really understand it. Misty really put it in the words that I could never do, and that really helped. So between you and her, this was very successful. So and I really appreciate that, and wanted to reach out and thank you guys for this.
I'm really glad.
Very, very glad that it worked out. I was after that phone call, I was not sure.
Yeah. And this one too, I think I sent David back to ask you for things like a dozen times, because I could see, again, in what I'm looking for, the ideal is this sort of idea of a primary source. That's a fancy academic term for the original thing that reported on it, as opposed to, the secondary source, which is, oh yeah, he said this book was about that. And because you didn't have a lot of those, I was like trying to see if I could dig deeper or prompt anything, because it did wind up looking different from a lot of the packets we see, which have things like the civilian records will back up other things and sort of look more medical record-y. But yeah, I'm really glad, because I could see if you had somebody who was wanting to interpret things to the negative. I don't even want to say it's like being persnickety, because I've read regulations. They're vague enough that you can't be persnickety. It's your own personal interpretation of it that's being persnickety. If they wanted to be a jerk about it, they could have caused problems. But I think everything, it was being able to put everything together in a way that, made sense and showed the body of evidence.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I stayed with the military and never reached out to a civilian doctor was because of the fact my insurance, they would say, hey, that's on the job injury. You need to go to the VA. I can't talk to you about that. And that was one of the bigger problems that I ran into with reaching out to my civilian doctors. And that's why, the progress notes that you saw were all from the VA, because, hey, look, I'm going through, my comp and pen. I might as well just stay with the VA and just do all my documentation through the VA. I might as well do all my labs, might as well do all my x-rays.
And they do keep really good documentation.
might as well do everything there instead of trying to, okay, gotta go and pay a medical bill over here with my private, doctor on top of that, because that my deductibles, they're expensive, and
Yeah.
I can't necessarily pay that and go and have MRIs done and things like that when I can just go to the VA and have it done. And so for my case, that's why I stayed with the VA. But knowing that, having outside progress notes and diagnoses and things like that is definitely very welcomed in this process.
Yeah. And I will say too that, and I may be biased because the VA I work with is actually one of the, it's a very high-end, well-run. They really, really make an effort. They really take their medical care seriously. But I think the VA gets a lot more stigma than is necessarily deserved. Like any healthcare institution, they've had some serious issues over time. And like any government entity, they've had serious issues over time. But the fact is, they're really good at documentation, being, bureaucrats. But also the people who work there tend to be there for a reason, and tend to work there because they want to serve, not necessarily because, it's a paycheck. So,
Right.
there is nothing wrong with the VA that isn't wrong with every other hospital system in the country, let's be honest.
It's a work in progress. We'll
Yes,
say that.
yes,
So
and it's
it definitely is.
always all of healthcare is about competing interests and competing priorities, and it's just whose priority gets prioritized at the cost of another. And the calculus is different at the VA because of the way it's run, and things get a little weird that we're all really used to in the rest of the healthcare system in the US. That if you went to Europe or brought somebody from like Germany to the US, they would have no idea why we do things the way we do. But we're just used to it. And it's, again, that difference that the VA is a little different and we're not used to it. It kind of gets that reputation. Makes sense if you're in it. It's internally consistent. It doesn't make sense to anybody else, but neither do their systems. So.
Okay. So I hope you enjoyed that segment of the interview. As always, Misty had some great things to say, and Matt had some great questions for us. I've got one more segment of this interview to go, so about another 30 minutes, a little bit less to go before we're finished with this. And then I've actually got a couple of more interviews lined up, so I think you'll get some other great information from those as well. So please tune back for the next episode. Before I sign off, I'd like to remind everyone that this is my full-time profession, and I do have a variety of services that I have available for you. Please go to rcretirement.com and take a look at the Fees for Services tab. You can see a great many of the services that I have. And if you would like to simply support my work on an ongoing basis without contracting me for any particular type of service, you can do so at patreon.com/rcretirement. And you can sign up for any of several pre-established levels of support, or you can create one of your own. If you would also like to support me in another way, you can click on the Amazon shopping links, the affiliate links on rcretirement.com, and at no additional cost to you, you can support RC Retirement in that manner. So there's a whole lot of ways that you can support the site in all kinds of ways. And of course, the last one is, of course, come over here to this side of the screen and click the subscribe button and increase the subscription rate to the channel. And of course, there's always the like button and the share button, to also grow the audience, both of which I greatly appreciate. You can do that for me as well. So, all of these great things you can do, and what I can do for you is, of course, continue to support you by answering your questions and producing content, hopefully, doing the things that you want. And if I'm not, then or if I am, then please shoot me an email at dj@rcretirement.com and let me know. Contact me as much as you'd like and let me know what you're thinking. All right, so until next time, I thank you for being a part of this audience and for spending your time with me, and look forward to talking to you again. Until then, thank you for your service. Have a great day.
If you liked what you heard on today's episode, then please go below and give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe to this channel. Also, please let other people know about this channel and the information it can provide for them. If you have questions or comments, then please have no qualms about posting them in the comments section below. Please remember the RC Retirement YouTube channel and the RC Retirement website are not recognized or endorsed by the Department of Defense, the Department of Veterans Affairs, or any other government agency. The information presented in these resources are for entertainment and informational purposes only. Also, the content of either of these resources should not be considered financial or legal advice. Please consult with your own legal counsel, accountant, or financial planner before making any decisions based on what you have learned here. As always, thank you for watching the RC Retirement YouTube channel.